My graduation day should have been the proudest moment of my life. Instead, it nearly killed me and revealed the devastating truth about my family. The air in that auditorium hung heavy with cheap perfume and excited whispers. I sat in the third row, my cap nudged slightly, diploma waiting somewhere behind the stage. My vision had been blurring all morning, but I dismissed it as nerves. For grueling years of late nights, juggling part-time jobs, and surviving on instant ramen had led to this exact moment. I wasn't about to miss it just because I felt lightheaded. When they finally called my name, I stood. The floor beneath my feet lurched like a ship caught in a storm. I took one step, then another. The applause sounded distant, muffled, as if someone had packed cotton in my ears. I made it halfway up the stairs before my legs just gave out. The fall itself felt impossibly slow, dreamlike. I remember thinking, how embarrassing will this be? Everyone will whisper about the girl who couldn't even walk across the stage. Then, everything went dark. I woke to the harsh glow of fluorescent lights and the steady, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. A kind-eyed nurse was adjusting N4 in my arm. She smiled softly when she saw me looking around, disoriented and so utterly confused. "You're at Providence Hospital," she explained gently. "You collapsed during your graduation ceremony. We've already contacted your emergency contacts." My throat felt like sandpaper. "My parents?" I croaked. "Yes, both numbers on file. They should be here soon." I nodded, closing my eyes again. A part of me felt a flicker of relief. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that finally broke through the wall that had been building between us for years. Maybe they'd finally see how hard I'd pushed myself, how much I'd truly been struggling. The first hour crawled by. I drifted in and out of consciousness, each time expecting to see my mother's worried face or my father's stern, familiar expression. Instead, there were only nurses and doctors, their hushed conversations filled with alarming words like dehydration, malnutrition, and exhaustion. By the third hour, I stopped looking toward the door every time it opened. By the fifth hour, the cold, hard truth settled in: they weren't coming. My phone sat on the small table beside my bed. With shaking hands, during one of my more lucid moments, I reached for it, careful not to disturb the four-line. Social media felt like a cruel joke, but I opened it anyway, desperately searching for some explanation, any reason why. And there it was. A post, uploaded just 2 hours after I collapsed. The photo showed my entire family at the Corner Bistro, our favorite restaurant. My mother wore her pearl necklace, the one she saved for special occasions. My father had his arm around my sister, Evelyn's shoulders, radiating pride. Evelyn herself looked radiant in a yellow sundress, her husband David beside her, with their 2 kids, Chloe and Leo, making silly faces at the camera. The caption read, "Family Day without the drama." Sometimes you need to celebrate the good things in life with people who don't make everything about themselves. So blessed. I stared at those words until they blurred. People who don't make everything about themselves. I had worked 3 jobs to put myself through college because they'd refused to help after I chose journalism instead of law. I'd missed countless family dinners because I was either working or buried in textbooks. I'd apologized 1,000 times for not being the daughter they wanted. The comment section was a sea of hearts and congratulations. Aunt Carol wrote, "You all look so happy." Cousin Ben added, "Best family ever." Nobody asked where I was. Nobody seemed to notice I was missing. I turned off my phone, staring up at the ceiling tiles, counting the small holes in each one until my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. The doctors kept me for 3 days. They ran tests, pumped me full of fluids, and lectured me about taking care of myself. Dr. Sanchez, a woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her black hair, sat on the edge of my bed on the second day. "Your body was running on empty," she said quietly. "You've been malnourished for months, maybe longer. When was the last time you had a proper meal?" I couldn't even remember. Food had become an afterthought, something I grabbed between classes and work shifts. You need to understand how serious this is, she continued. Your body shut down because you weren't giving it what it needed. If you keep going like this, next time might be worse. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Is there someone who can look after you when you're discharged? Family? The laugh that escaped my throat sounded bitter, even to my own ears. No. No family. She looked at me with something like understanding, then patted my hand before leaving. My phone stayed off for most of those 3 days. I didn't want to see more photos, more captions about drama-free celebrations. On the morning of my discharge, I finally turned it back on to arrange transportation home. 75 missed calls. All from my father's number, accumulated over 3 days while I'd kept my phone off. My heart stuttered in my chest. Maybe they'd realized. Maybe they felt guilty. Maybe this was their way of apologizing. Then I saw the text messages. They started the day after my collapse, growing increasingly demanding, "Call me back. This is important. Why aren't you answering?" And finally, sent just that morning, "We need you. Answer immediately." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We heard what happened." Not, "We're sorry." Just, "We need you." I sat there in that hospital bed, dressed in the clothes a nurse had kindly retrieved from my apartment, and something inside me crystallized into cold, hard clarity. They hadn't called because they cared about my well-being. They needed something from me. My finger hovered over my father's contact information. Part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl who'd thought her father hung the moon, wanted to call back. Wanted to hear his voice, even if it was demanding and cold. Wanted to matter to them, even if only for a moment. Instead, I blocked his number. Then my mother's. Then Evelyn's. And David's. And every other family member whose contact information sat in my phone like little landmines waiting to explode. The silence felt enormous. I left the hospital with discharge papers, a prescription for vitamins, and instructions to follow up with my regular doctor. I had no regular doctor. I had no money for vitamins. I had nothing except a degree I'd almost died earning, and a family who'd celebrated my absence. My apartment felt smaller than I remembered. It was a studio in a building that had seen better decades, with walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's television through the plaster. But it was mine. I'd paid for it myself, furnished it with second-hand finds, made it into something that felt safe. I collapsed onto my bed and finally let myself cry. Great, heaving sobs that shook my entire body, leaving me gasping for air. I cried for the family I'd wanted, for the daughter I'd tried to be, for all the years I'd spent seeking approval that would never come. When the tears finally stopped, I felt hollow, but somehow lighter, as though I'd purged something toxic from my system. The next morning, I started looking for jobs. Real jobs, not the part-time minimum wage positions I'd been juggling. My journalism degree might not have been what my parents wanted, but I was good at it. I'd interned at the Metro Sentinel during my final semester, written pieces that had actually been published. Within a week, I had 3 interviews lined up. Within 2 weeks, I had a job offer from a mid-sized magazine as a junior staff writer. The pay wasn't spectacular, but it was enough to live on, enough to start building something real. I threw myself into work with the same intensity I'd given to my studies. I took every assignment, no matter how mundane. I stayed late, came in early, made myself indispensable. My editor, Eleanor, a sharp woman who wore red lipstick like armor, noticed. "You've got drive," she told me one evening as we were both packing up to leave. "Most kids your age treat this like a stepping stone. You treat it like it matters." "It does matter," I said simply. She smiled, understanding something I hadn't said. "Keep that attitude, and you'll go far." Months passed. I moved to a better apartment, one with walls thick enough that I couldn't hear my neighbors' lives bleeding through. I bought real furniture, not just whatever I could find at thrift stores. I started eating regular meals, remembering Dr. Sanchez's warnings. My phone stayed quiet without my family's numbers, without the constant anxiety of wondering when they'd call or what they'd criticize. I felt something unfamiliar, peace. Then, 8 months after my graduation, Eleanor called me into her office. Her expression was serious, the kind that usually preceded bad news. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. My stomach dropped. I'd been doing good work. Great work, even. Surely she wasn't firing me. "We've been asked to do a feature piece," she began, pulling out a folder thick with papers. "It's a big deal. Local business dynasty, family empire built from nothing. All that inspirational stuff. Usually, I'd give this to someone more senior, but I think you should do it." Relief flooded through me. "Really? Why me?" "Because you've earned it. And because you're hungry in a way the senior writers aren't anymore. They're comfortable, complacent. You still want to prove something." She slid the folder across the desk. I opened it, already planning my approach, thinking about interview questions and narrative angles. Then I saw the company name printed across the top page, and my blood turned to ice. Harrison and Associates. My father's law firm. "This is a joke," I whispered. Eleanor frowned. "What?" "No, this is a legitimate assignment. The Harrison family has agreed to full access, interviews, the works. It's a huge opportunity." I couldn't breathe. My father's face stared up at me from a promotional photo, distinguished and proud in his expensive suit. Beside him stood Evelyn, identified as junior partner and future of the firm. "I can't do this," I said, pushing the folder back across the desk. "Why not? This could make your career. A feature like this, done well, gets noticed." How could I explain? How could I tell her that the successful family in those glossy photos had left me in a hospital bed? That they'd celebrated my absence? That I'd blocked every one of them because caring about them had nearly destroyed me? "It's a conflict of interest," I managed. "How? Do you have some connection to them?" The word daughter stuck in my throat. Saying it felt like claiming something I'd given up the right to claim when I blocked their numbers. "I just can't," I repeated. Eleanor studied me for a long moment. She was perceptive, always good at reading people. I watched her put pieces together, saw the moment understanding dawned. "They're your family," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to speak. "The ones who didn't come when you collapsed." I'd told her that story once, late one night, when we'd both been working on a deadline and exhaustion had loosened my tongue. I hadn't mentioned names, hadn't specified details, but clearly she'd remembered. "I see." She pulled the folder back, closed it with decisive finality. "Then we'll give it to someone else." "Eleanor, I'm sorry. I know this is a big deal." "Stop." She held up one hand. "You've earned enough goodwill here that turning down one assignment isn't going to hurt you. Besides, you're right about the conflict of interest. I should have checked first." I stood to leave, grateful and guilty in equal measure. "Wait," she said. "Off the record, just between us. Do you want them to know you're here? That you're doing well?" Did I? Part of me wanted them to see what I'd become without them. Wanted them to choke on their judgment and their dismissal. But a larger part, the part that had been healing slowly over these months, wanted nothing to do with them at all. "No," I said. "Let them stay in their world. I'm building my own." She nodded, something like approval in her expression. "Good for you." I left her office feeling shaken, but also strangely empowered. I'd been given a choice, and I'd chosen myself. Not revenge, not reconciliation, just myself. Life continued. I wrote stories about local artists, small business owners, community activists. I found satisfaction in giving voice to people whose stories mattered but often went untold. My byline appeared with increasing frequency, and slowly, people in the industry started to recognize my name. The city I lived in felt different now, like I was seeing it through new eyes. Every coffee shop, every street corner, every park bench held potential stories. I interviewed a 70-year-old woman who'd started a bookstore in her garage after losing her husband. I spent weeks following a group of teenagers who were cleaning up abandoned lots and turning them into basketball courts. I sat with a former chef who now ran a food truck, serving meals to anyone who needed them, payment optional. These people welcomed me into their lives with an openness my own family had never shown. They trusted me with their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. Each article I wrote felt like building a bridge between them and readers who might never have known these stories existed. My apartment became a sanctuary, filled with books, plants I somehow managed to keep alive, and a small desk position by the window where I wrote in the early mornings before heading to the office. I'd wake up at dawn, make coffee in the French press I bought myself as a graduation gift, and spend an hour working on personal essays that had nothing to do with assignments. Writing became more than a career. It became how I processed everything that had happened. How I made sense of the hole my family had left behind. One particularly cold morning in November, about 6 months after I started at the magazine, I was walking to work when I passed a homeless man sitting outside a convenience store. Something about him looked familiar. As I got closer, I realized it was Mr. Thompson, my high school English teacher. "Mr. Thompson?" I asked hesitantly. He looked up, his eyes taking a moment to focus. Recognition dawned slowly. "Do I know you?" "I was in your junior year class. You told me I had a gift for writing, that I should pursue journalism." His face softened with memory. "Of course, I remember you. Always turned in your assignments early. Always asked thoughtful questions. We talked for 20 minutes. He told me about losing his teaching position due to budget cuts, about how his savings had evaporated during a medical crisis, about the shelter system and its limitations. He never asked for money, never made excuses. He simply shared his story with the same honesty he'd once demanded from his students. I gave him my business card and $50 from my wallet. "This isn't charity," I said. "I want to write about you, about what happened, if you're willing." His eyes filled with tears. Nobody's asked to hear my story in a long time. The piece I wrote about Mr. Thompson and the failure of systems meant to protect educators ran 2 weeks later. It sparked conversations across the city about teacher compensation, healthcare access, and the thin line between stability and homelessness. The school district reached out to him. Former students started a fund. Within a month, he had an apartment and a part-time position at a community college. Eleanor pulled me aside after that article published. "You have something special," she said. "That ability to see people, really see them, to make readers care about someone they've never met. Don't lose that." I promised I wouldn't. But success brought its own challenges. As my profile grew, so did the demands on my time. I was invited to speak at a college journalism class, then another, then a panel discussion about storytelling in modern media. Each opportunity felt surreal, like I was play-acting at being someone important. During one of these speaking engagements at State University, a student raised her hand during the Q&A session. "How do you deal with sources who are also family members?" she asked. The question hit me like a physical blow. I'd never talked publicly about my family situation. Had always kept that part of my life private. "That's complicated," I began carefully. "Professional ethics require objectivity. Personal relationships can compromise that. Sometimes the most ethical choice is to recuse yourself from stories where you can't maintain appropriate distance." Another student jumped in. "But what if the story is important? What if you're the only one who can tell it properly?" I thought about the Harrison and Associates folder still sitting on Eleanor's desk, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to take it on. Then you have to decide what matters more, I said slowly. The story or the relationship? And sometimes, if the relationship is already broken, the decision becomes easier. After the session ended, several students approached me with their own questions and stories. One young woman, barely 20, told me about being disowned by her parents for choosing art school over medical school. Another spoke about the pressure of family expectations, the weight of disappointing people who'd sacrificed for you. I listened to each of them, shared what wisdom I'd gained from my own experience, and felt something shift inside me. Maybe my story, painful as it was, could help others navigate similar situations. Maybe that was worth something. The holidays approached with their usual dread. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, all those calendar markers that emphasized family, togetherness, belonging. I volunteered at a soup kitchen on Thanksgiving. Spent Christmas Day with Eleanor and her husband. Rang in the New Year alone in my apartment with a bottle of wine and a stack of books I'd been meaning to read. It wasn't the picture-perfect holiday season advertisers sold, but it was mine. Nobody criticized my choices. Nobody made passive-aggressive comments about wasted potential. Nobody looked at me with disappointment barely concealed behind forced smiles. In January, I got an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Hi. Is this the journalist who wrote about Daniel Thompson? A woman's voice. Nervous, but determined. Yes, this is she. My name is Jessica Evans. I'm a teacher, or I was until last month. I saw your article about Mr. Thompson, about what happened to him. I think the same thing is happening to me, and I don't know what to do. We talked for 2 hours. Jessica's story was different in details, but similar in outcome: budget cuts, medical bills, a system that failed people who dedicated their lives to public service. By the end of the conversation, I had pages of notes and permission to tell her story. That article led to another, then another. I became known for pieces about systemic failures, about people falling through cracks in systems meant to catch them. My inbox filled with messages from readers sharing their own experiences, from sources wanting to tell their stories. The work was rewarding but exhausting. Some nights I came home drained, having spent the day hearing about tragedies and injustices I couldn't fix, only document. But I kept going, because these stories mattered. Because giving voice to the voiceless felt like the most important thing I could do. A year after my graduation, I won a regional journalism award for a piece about immigrant families building lives in our city. The ceremony was small, intimate, held in a hotel conference room with maybe 50 people in attendance. As I stood at the podium, holding my plaque and giving my acceptance speech, I scanned the audience out of habit. No family members, no familiar faces from my old life. And I realized I didn't mind. The people who were there, my colleagues and friends from this new life I'd built, were cheering for me. They'd shown up. They cared. After the ceremony, Eleanor approached with champagne and a knowing smile. Your family doesn't know what they're missing. No, I agreed. They really don't. We were standing by the refreshments table when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Excuse me, are you the journalist who wrote the immigrant families piece? I turned and found myself face to face with David, Evelyn's husband. He didn't recognize me at first, his expression polite but distant. Then his eyes widened with shock. Oh my God, it's you. I finished setting down my champagne glass. Wait, please. I didn't know you'd be here. I came because I'm on the committee that sponsors these awards. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. How have you been? Nobody's heard from you in over a year. I've been busy building a life, I said coldly. You know, one without drama. He had the grace to wince. Listen, about that post Evelyn made. She didn't mean, yes, she did. And you all agreed with her, or you wouldn't have been posing for family photos while I was in the hospital. We didn't know you were in the hospital until later. By the time we found out, you'd already blocked everyone. Your father-in-law called me 75 times over 3 days, I pointed out. Not once did any of those messages ask if I was okay. Every single one demanded I call back because they needed something. That's not family. That's convenience. David opened his mouth, closed it again. Around us, people were starting to notice our conversation, curious about the tension crackling between us. I should go, I said. They miss you, he said quietly. Evelyn especially. She's been trying to find you. She tagged me in that post, I reminded him. She knew exactly where I was, and she chose to humiliate me instead. I walked away before he could respond, before the anger building in my chest could spill over into something public and ugly. Eleanor caught up with me near the exit. You okay? She asked. I will be. She squeezed my shoulder. Go home. Take tomorrow off. You've earned it. I went home and sat in my apartment, surrounded by the life I'd built with my own hands, and felt the old wounds trying to reopen. For a moment, I considered unblocking them, reaching out, explaining everything. Then I remembered that photo, that caption, the casual cruelty of their celebration. My phone stayed silent, all those numbers still blocked. But David's appearance had rattled something loose. For the next few weeks, I found myself thinking about my family more than I had in months, wondering what they were doing, whether they actually missed me or just missed having someone to criticize and control. The holidays came and went. Then winter melted into spring, and spring warmed into summer. 14 months had passed since my graduation collapse when Eleanor called me to her office with news about the Harrison and Associates assignment. Her expression was carefully neutral as I sat down. Don't panic, she said immediately. But I need to tell you something. My heart sank. What? Harrison and Associates has requested you specifically for their feature piece. By name. The room tilted. What? No. You said Mark was doing it. Mark was, but apparently they saw your award-winning piece and insisted on you. They're claiming they want a fresh perspective and authentic voice. She made air quotes around the phrases, her skepticism evident. This is because David saw me at the ceremony, I said flatly. They know I work here now. Probably. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I thought about running, about quitting my job, moving to another city, starting over somewhere they'd never find me. But why should I? I'd built something here. I'd earned my place. I'll do it, I heard myself say. Eleanor shot up. Are you sure? Because I can still say no. We can claim scheduling conflicts, whatever you need. I'm sure. And strangely, I was. But I'm doing it my way. Real journalism, not a puff piece. If they want me, they get the truth. A slow smile spread across Eleanor's face. Now that's the attitude I was hoping for. Just be careful. Personal feelings can cloud professional judgment. I know, but maybe it's time they saw who I really am, what I became despite them. The interview was scheduled for the following week. I spent the intervening days researching, preparing questions, treating this like any other professional assignment. I wouldn't let emotion compromise my work. The Harrison and Associates offices were downtown, occupying 3 floors of a gleaming glass tower. I'd never been here before. During my childhood, my father had kept his work life separate, as though bringing us into his professional space would somehow contaminate it. The receptionist, a young woman with a bright smile, directed me to the conference room on the top floor. As I rode the elevator up, I practiced breathing exercises, centering myself. The doors opened to reveal a space that screamed money and power, original artwork on the walls, furniture that cost more than my entire apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And there, standing by those windows, was my father. He turned when he heard the elevator, and for a moment, neither of us moved. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. But he still had that bearing, that presence that had always made me feel small. "You came," he said finally. "I'm here to do a job," I replied, keeping my voice professional. "This is a professional engagement, nothing more." Something flickered across his face. Disappointment? Anger? I couldn't tell, and found I didn't care. "Of course." He gestured to the conference table. "Please sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine." I set up my recorder, pulled out my notepad, slipped into the role of journalist-like armor. "Let's begin. Tell me about how Harrison and Associates was founded." For the next hour, we danced around the elephant in the room. He talked about building the firm from nothing, about cases won and reputation earned. I asked probing questions, pushed for details he clearly didn't want to share. This wasn't the puff piece they'd wanted. This was real journalism. Finally, he stopped mid-sentence and leaned back in his chair. "This isn't what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I thought you'd at least acknowledge that we're related." "We share DNA," I corrected. "That's not the same as being related." His jaw tightened. "You blocked us all. Completely cut us off without explanation." The recorder was still running. "Good. Let him hear how this sounded." "I collapsed at my graduation," I said evenly. "The hospital called you. You didn't come. Instead, my sister posted a photo celebrating a family day without the drama. You called me 75 times, not to check if I was alive, but to tell me you needed something. What explanation did you require? We didn't know you were in the hospital when that photo was taken. You knew when you called. You knew, and you still made it about what you needed instead of asking how I was." Silence stretched between us. Through the windows, the city continued its indifferent life, people going about their days, unaware of the confrontation happening in this glass tower. "I'm sorry," he said finally, the words sounding rusty, unpracticed. "We should have come. We should have checked on you." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have. But you didn't. And that told me everything I needed to know. So, this interview, demanding you specifically, this is all just revenge? A chance to humiliate us?" I met his eyes steadily. "No. This is me doing my job. If that humiliates you, maybe you should examine why." The door opened and Evelyn walked in, stopping short when she saw me. "Dad?" I heard voices. Oh, she'd changed since I'd seen her last. More polished, more professional, every inch the successful lawyer our father had always wanted. She wore her hair pulled back severely, her suit impeccably tailored. "Hi, Evelyn," I said calmly. "What are you doing here?" The question came out sharp, accusatory. "Interviewing your father for a feature piece." "What are you doing here?" "I work here. I belong here." The emphasis on the last word wasn't subtle. I smiled, the expression cold. "Yes, you've made it very clear where you think I belong. Or rather, where I don't." She had the grace to flush. "That post was taken out of context." "Really? What context makes Family Day without the drama anything other than cruel?" Our father stood abruptly. "Perhaps we should continue this another time." "No," I said, gathering my things with deliberate calm. "I think we're done here. I have everything I need for the article." "Wait," Evelyn said. "Is that it?" You show up after disappearing for over a year, ask some questions, and leave? Yes, just like you showed up at that restaurant, took your photos, and left me in a hospital bed. Funny how that works. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button. Behind me, I could hear them arguing in low, urgent voices. The doors opened, and I stepped inside, turning to face them one last time. My father stood at the conference room entrance, Evelyn beside him. Both of them looked shaken, uncertain. It was the first time I'd ever seen them look anything less than completely in control. For what it's worth, I said as the doors began to close, I would have forgiven you if you just apologized. If you'd shown up at the hospital, even a day late, and said sorry, but you didn't. You waited until you needed something, then sent 75 calls demanding I answer immediately, never once asking if I was okay. That's not family. That's entitlement. The doors closed on their shocked faces. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. I watched the numbers descend, each floor taking me further from the confrontation, further from the people who had once defined my entire world. My hands shook slightly as I gripped my bag, adrenaline still coursing through my system. When I reached the lobby, I walked straight past the glossy reception area and out into the afternoon sunlight. The air felt crisp, cleaner somehow, as though I'd been holding my breath for the past 2 hours and could finally exhale. My phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed across the screen. "How'd it go?" she asked without preamble. Professionally, I got everything I need for a solid article. Personally? I paused, watching people hurry past on the sidewalk, everyone absorbed in their own lives and problems. It needed to happen. That's cryptic. I know. I'll explain at the office. Right now, I need to walk. Take your time. See you tomorrow if you need the rest of the day. I did walk, for hours actually. Through downtown, past the park where I used to study on sunny afternoons, along the waterfront where joggers and cyclists shared the path. The physical movement helped process the emotional turbulence, gave my mind space to untangle what had just happened. Seeing my father again had been strange. He'd seemed smaller somehow, less imposing than the figure who'd loomed over my childhood. Maybe he'd shrunk, or maybe I'd grown. Evelyn had looked exactly as I'd expected, polished, professional, defensive. She'd built the life our father had wanted for both of us, but I couldn't tell if she was happy or just successful. There was a difference. By the time I got home, the sun was setting. My feet ached from walking in dress shoes, and my mind felt wrung out like a dish rag. I kicked off my shoes, changed into comfortable clothes, and settled at my desk with my laptop. The article wrote itself over the next 3 days. Words poured out faster than I could type them. Months of research and preparation combining with the fresh rawness of that interview. I detailed the firm's founding, its growth, its reputation. I interviewed former clients, current employees, competitors. I presented a complete picture, unflinching and honest. When I included the section about workplace culture and employee retention rates, I made sure every fact was verified, every quote attributable. When I mentioned the sealed settlements, I cited public records and court documents. This wasn't revenge. This was journalism. Eleanor reviewed my first draft with her usual sharp eye, marking passages, asking for clarification, pushing me to dig deeper in places. We worked through 3 more revisions before she finally nodded her approval. "This is going to make waves," she warned. "Are you ready for that?" I've been ready since I blocked their numbers. The article published on a Wednesday morning. I was at my desk when it went live, watching the view counter climb. Within the first hour, it had been shared across social media dozens of times. By lunch, it was trending on local news aggregators. By evening, national legal blogs were discussing it. My work email exploded, readers thanking me for honest journalism, lawyers arguing about the points I'd raised, former Harrison and Associates employees reaching out with their own stories. And one email, sent from a generic account, containing just 2 sentences, "You always were vindictive." I hope you're satisfied with destroying what we built. I recognized my father's writing style even without a signature. I deleted the email without responding. Over the next week, the ripple effects continued. 2 major clients publicly announced they were reviewing their relationships with Harrison and Associates. A legal ethics board launched a formal inquiry into some of the billing practices I'd mentioned. Industry publications started their own investigations, using my article as a jumping-off point. My father sent another email, this one longer and angrier, accusing me of sabotaging the family business out of spite. I deleted it without reading past the first paragraph. My mother sent nothing. But David did. His email arrived late one night, time-stamped after midnight. I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to try. What you wrote was fair. That's what's killing them. They can't dismiss it as lies or exaggeration. Everything you reported was factual, documented, verifiable. They wanted you to write a puff piece that made them look good, and instead you wrote the truth. Evelyn hasn't said much, but I know she's struggling with this. She spent her whole life trying to be the perfect daughter, doing everything they asked, and now she's seeing that maybe perfect isn't the same as right. Your article made her question things she's never questioned before. I'm not asking you to forgive them or reach out or anything like that. I just thought you should know that your work is having an impact beyond just the public reaction. You're making people think, including your own family. Maybe especially your own family. Take care of yourself. I read David's email 3 times, then filed it away with Evelyn's apology. These messages felt like breadcrumbs, a trail leading back to people who'd hurt me. Following that trail would be easy. Forgiving them might even be possible eventually. But I'd built something on my own, something solid and real that didn't require their approval or acceptance. Going back would mean risking that independence, that hard-won sense of self. So I moved forward instead. 3 months after the article published, I was promoted to senior staff writer. 6 months after that, I won another award, this time at the state level. A year after that, I was offered a position at a national magazine, one of the major publications I dreamed about writing for. I took the job and moved across the country to a city where nobody knew the Harrison family name, where I could build yet another life on my own terms. Sometimes I still thought about that day in the conference room, facing my father and sister across a professional divide. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd answered those 75 calls, if I'd let them back into my life. But mostly I thought about the girl who'd collapsed at her graduation ceremony, exhausted and alone, and how far she'd come since then. I thought about the life I'd built from nothing. The career I'd earned through determination and talent. The person I'd become without their approval. My phone stayed silent, all those numbers still blocked. And in that silence, I found something I'd never had before, the freedom to be exactly who I wanted to be, without apology, without explanation, without needing anyone's permission. That was worth more than any family photo, any hollow reconciliation, any relationship built on obligation rather than genuine care. I became someone I was proud of. Someone who told difficult truths and refused to compromise her integrity. Someone who'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you, even when they're family. Especially when they're family. And in the end, that was the only revenge I needed. Living well, succeeding on my own terms, and never once looking back. What would you have done in my place?